Okay, so really the last thing we need to handle before we wrap up this series is right now, if we go to any component, this one is owned by Kermit, but if we navigate to the edit page, we actually see, and we should since we're not protecting it or anything, we actually see a place to edit a post that is not ours. Now, we're still protecting that edit route on the back end, so this wouldn't even work if we did wire up the props correctly, but it's not a good user experience to show a user that they could edit something and then also not let them. Let's actually see what happens. But the first thing we need to do is we need to give all of these components the props that they need. So if we look at the post detail view component, it requires the rating, set rating, handle on save rating, and is saving rating props. So let's pass those in. Here, we'll say rating equals rating, set rating equals set rating, and what else do we need in here? And handle on save rating equals handle on save rating, and is saving rating equals is saving rating. Cool. So let's save that. Good. That's handled. Okay. Now I'm guessing that all of these also need to go in this post detail edit component. But let's check it out first just to make sure. Okay, it needs a caption, set caption, is updating, and handle on update. Cool. Let's do that. Let's head back there and say caption equals caption, set caption equals set caption, handle on update equals handle on update, and is updating equals is updating. And just doing that, actually we now see that we are able to attempt to edit someone else's post. Hello again. Let's save that post. User is not allowed to update other users' posts. Okay, cool. So it doesn't work. Our API is still protected, but again, we shouldn't even be showing this to a user that isn't allowed to edit that post, just for good measure. So to do that, we're going to need to ensure that there's a forbidden route, essentially. Or at least, like, let's just display a forbidden message at the moment. We can delete all this because we no longer need it, because this is pretty much handled up to this point. But let's create a tiny little forbidden component, just that makes sure that it just displays a nice little forbidden message in case someone tries to go somewhere that they're not allowed to go to. So let's come in here, create a new component, forbidden, and we'll say export default function forbidden. That takes in a message that says you aren't allowed to access that. Period. Good grammar. And we will return some JSX. Class name equals forbidden. And an H2 that says 403 forbidden. And then just displays the message. Now let's give it a little style too. Forbidden.css. And we'll import it. Import forbidden.css. And then, I don't know, let's just give it a little bit of spacing. H2, margin bottom, 10 pixels. Nothing fancy. Just space them out a little bit so they look nice. Cool, let's export it. Export forbidden from forbidden. I like saying that word. Great. Now inside the post detail edit component, let's actually import forbidden. Import forbidden from components. Now all we need to do here is make sure that the user is the post owner. Otherwise, show them the forbidden message. And at the moment, we could do that. Let's just pass in the user owns post and say if not user owns post, return. Let's just wrap in the same exact thing. Now there's we could have totally just rendered it inside here with user owns post. We could do one of these actually. This is nicer. So we'll say if the user owns the post, render this. That allows them to edit the post. Otherwise, render forbidden with the message of you aren't allowed. Let me fix that O. You aren't allowed to edit other users' posts. Cool. Okay. And that should work fine. All we need to do now is inside of post detail, just pass user owns post equals user owns post. Just like so. Save that. Good to go. Now, doing that actually should work fine. We now see this forbidden message saying, hey, you aren't allowed to edit user posts. You shouldn't be here. Get back out of there. And there should be no way to access it. But if we go to our own post and we go to the edit route, we should see the ability to edit it. But we want a way to navigate there easier. That's having to go here and type that in. That's also not a good UI experience. It's not a good UX. So let's head back into the post detail view component and let's import the link component from React Router DOM. And let's go ahead and make sure a few things happens here. First, let's ensure that if the user owns the post, that we return something else. I don't know. Again, we could probably just put this in here. That'd make more sense, wouldn't it? Let's just say user owns post. Otherwise, render this. And throw all that rating. So if they're not the user, then we let them rate it. If they are the user, then let's just render a paragraph tag that says update your post. And then has a link to /posts/post ID /edit. Now you could actually do that as a relative route too, but just to make this clear, button class name equals btn and it just says edit. Now we also need to take in a post ID here, huh? So let's do that here. And let's save that. Cool. Now we need to pass in the post ID and the user owns post to this post detail view. So user logged in, we don't need that anymore. Good to know. But we do need the post ID equals post ID. Good. And we need user owns post. User owns post equals user owns post. Cool. Now, hopefully, we can head back to our main page. If we see this right here, we see a link to update your post. Great. And it takes us to the edit route. If we go back, we see that that is not there. Cool. And if we go to a one we do not own, we see that we can rate it. And if we go to the edit page, we are forbidden from editing users' posts. And now we're like, this is about as close as we're going to get to a fully functioning application that is centralizing our post logic and our auth logic and making sure everything is working pretty seamlessly. And we've nested our routes and we've handled passing data. We've used custom hooks. Like we really got so many cool advanced things going on here that our application is in a pretty decent state. I would say the only other thing we could maybe think about improving is this concept of user owning posts, just because in particular, like right here in this use post detail, we have this user logged in and we're using that. We were using that before. That's probably not useful anymore. This user owns post. I don't know how I feel about that. anytime I'm storing variables in here, I probably want to find a different way to approach this concept. And again, because we're basically taking state that already exists in our application and deriving some external state from it. So anytime I see something like that where I'm deriving external state from state that already exists, I'll probably set up what's known as a selector. And a selector function is pretty simple. All it is a function that takes in the state and it returns some value from that state. It derives the value from state. And so I'll declare selector functions usually below the actual hook itself. And so here we can come down here and say, and again, we don't need this initialized either anymore probably, so we can get rid of that, but we'll leave it for now. If we want to select, like let's say const select, or you know what, let's do that in the auth context here. So in here we'll also export a constant that says select is user authenticated. And then it will be a function that takes in the state that we have here, user and initialized. And then it derives that state into, is the user initialized, initialized, and user.username. Something like that. And that's an easy selector function that takes in the state that we have here, this and this, and then ensures and just does like a simple, very simple calculation of like, hey, is this user authenticated? Then we can call this function as many times as we want around our application. We can standardize it so we don't have to like constantly be checking, does the user and username exist? Are they initialized? And so it would probably make sense to go in and replace everything we had currently with all of these selector functions. So looking at that in the posts context, a really good one would be like, let's take the state is right here just as posts. Maybe we'd want to, I don't know, like take that post and select all the user-owned posts from it. So we can do something like this, like export const select user-owned posts equals user and posts, and all it does is derive state from both the user and the posts state. So we could say posts.filter and take each post and check to see if post.username is equal to user.username. Something like this. And so this is a really easy way to pass in the user state, the post state, and derive some value from it. So we can select user-owned posts from there. And again, another one in this post detail is we would just say, instead of saying user owns post, we'd have a selector function here that says select user owns post. And it just takes in a user and a post, and it runs this logic on it here. So does the username exist? User.username and post.username is equal to user.username. Something like that. And so now, instead of having to call this or create this new variable inside here every single time, we can just use the selector function around our application. And so here, I can then import this. Uh-oh, we're missing some stuff now? Oh yeah, I guess we no longer need this use auth context. Well, yeah, let's check it out. So if we go into our post detail here, post detail component, we can now also, from our use post detail hook, import this selector function, the select user owns post. Then from here, select user owns post. And then let's actually just go ahead and use the auth context here, since we no longer need it in our use post detail function. Let's take this here and let's throw it in this function right here, and we'll say const user equals use auth context. Then we'll call this function on with the post and the user, and that's how we'll determine if the user owns the post. And so this is just like a cleaner way usually to take state data and derive some kind of additional state from multiple pieces of state. And so then in this use post detail, we would no longer need this auth context. and we no longer need to pass around that user owns state everywhere. So we can just do that here. We could say const, instead of user owns post being pulled from user detail, we can say const user owns post equals select user owns post with the user and the post. If that is how we used it, let's just make sure. Yes. So when we save this, we take a look at this. Seems like our selector function is working fine. Take a look. Looks like we own that one. Don't own that one. Cool. Still seems to work. Let's make sure we go to the edit route. We're still forbidden. Still forbidden. Great. And if we go to our own, we can still update our post and everything works just like before. And with that, that pretty much covers everything that, at least for the time being, a number of different things, most of the core stuff that is found in any advanced React concepts course. Now, again, there's a few things like use callback, use memo, and some kind of memoization that you might see more regularly used, especially in when dealing with performance or when ensuring that values don't change more often. But honestly, like, there is so much here that we've just covered that if you've gotten through this, you should feel super, super proud of yourself. There's a ton of great stuff here. We've migrated the majority of our application's UI logic out of our components and into custom hooks. And in particular, there's not really a lot of logic left in the components at all. And we've also leveraged React context to make it simple to pass down global state about authentication or about posts directly to components at any level of nesting. On top of that, we've seen how to use React Router now to create nested routes and to protect routes using context and custom hooks. So we've done so many great things here, and hopefully by this point we've demonstrated some additional features and approaches to manage the application state that can help when developing non-trivial React apps. So congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back, because the work we've done here is, again, about as complex as a React app can get in terms of dealing with high-level concepts. So, again, pat yourself on the back. You've done great work. In the next series, we'll continue to develop our authentication suite and kind of look at how we can continue to build off of what we've done here, but use it to design a new feature, both on the front end and the back end, that allows users to reset their passwords. So that's it for now. I'll see you in the next series.